Hey guys, look, it's the destroyer of dads. So, you might be sitting there going, hey, Kaido, you know you're a little late to the party on this one, right? Like, everyone's already done the urgent quest? We kind of know how it goes. What are you talking about? Well, one, glad to hear you're playing the content. It's been a while since I've seen so many people getting together for UQs, and it's honestly exciting. Uh, Now, two, I didn't want to give my thoughts about the urgent quests until I've had the novelty wear off a little bit. So I farmed the UQ as much as I could, and I feel like I've finally gotten a grasp of what's going on with the mission. Uh, and I want to talk about it. The background video you're probably going to see during this will be our blind run with the Alliance, and I'm just going to talk about Dark Falz and my thoughts on urgent quests in general. So, sit back, relax, because here we go. Starting right off the rip with an unpopular opinion, I did not like urgent quests. Especially the ones we've had up until now. Like, an overwhelming majority of them seem to just be lacking a feeling of exclusivity. And we'll get to that point in a minute. But they just didn't feel quite like boss fights and events that I had become accustomed to. And then all of a sudden, we get Dark Falz appearing out of the blue, and all the pieces started to come together in my brain. So I started thinking about it, and I started focusing on what the urgent quests were and what we had, and I wanted to kind of take a look into our good new addition, Dingus Falls, as well as kind of look over some of the other urgent quests. From all the images I saw of him before doing the urgent quests with his hands out, I immediately had flashbacks to fighting Elder, and was kind of just like, this might be a letdown because we know the mechanics already. But I was really glad to find out that I was kind of wrong about it. This fight feels more like a mix of Elder and Persona from like Elmir's side, mixed together, which is a great starting point for this urgent quest. Beginning with the first phase, focusing on two easy-to-reach arms as a way to force a down and get more revives is a great mechanic. It's good to know right off the rip that Dark Falz isn't just an enemy that you can hold forward and mash attacks against. What really sets this fight apart and makes you realize how good it is when Dark Falz just starts moving around the battlefield. The absolute scale and size of this enemy just has me excited. This is the first boss enemy that undoubtedly feels like a boss fight. At the end of the first phase, there's that DPS check where everybody gets grabbed by his hands, and this acts as like a huge momentum shift point in this fight. Because if you pass that check, you get to deal a huge amount of damage to the break bar, and that is very important for later on. Attacking fast and dumping all your PAs really just is a good call because it makes that second phase easier. Speaking of second phase, that music. So good. If we don't get that as a music disc, I will forever be sad. Please, Sega, I know I don't mean anything to you guys, but don't hurt me, just release it. When Dark Falz starts to struggle and thrash about the stage, it really brings me back to that final struggle phase Persona from Elmir's side has. All of this really sells the momentum shifting in your favor in this fight. I also quite enjoy that by breaking all of the arms in this phase, it gives you that one moment to deal a huge amount of damage and give you that final change of the attack patterns from Dark Falz. Lastly, that ending screen where we all pose is a nice thing to bring back, and gosh, I missed that clear screen. Thank you, Sega. Just thank you. You're doing something good for once. As a final rating, I would give this mission a moderate to challenging rating, depending on your class, what you play, as well as the gear that you have. With a good party of 8 as a baseline though, I would say Dark Falz sits at a solid moderate difficulty. So don't go in expecting the hardest thing of all time, because it's a super, straightforward fight with minimal challenge in a big group with diversity. When you're limited in what you can do, that's when you're going to see the challenges start to show up. And with all that being said, I'm going to go back onto my opinion at the beginning of this video, which is that UQs didn't feel like UQs because, the exclusivity of the events, and they didn't feel quite right. But with that thought fresh in my mind, I tried to understand why I couldn't shake that feeling, and then while sitting around at work, it hit me. And to explain this thought, I needed to bring you back to base game for an explanation. You see, UQs used to be a great way to show off story bosses and big events that people wanted to see again, mixed in with suppression operations, with things that you wouldn't normally do, like mining base or cradle or seasonal quests. If you remember some of those seasonal quests, good on you. Those were fun. Sega, bring it back. In NGS, we tend to fight enemies that are big, scary, and kind of fun to fight, but then we can just fight them again as wild veterans. It just takes away from the sense of urgency, because we're already fighting these enemies all the time. So, it is what it is. Well, this is the point of the video where I'd like to point your attention to the differing model of base PSO2. And that was rooms and instances. To those uninitiated, PSO2 would have you go through major rooms till you reach the final boss room, big whoop, yada yada, where there would be a big bad enemy waiting for you, Oh, scary. Sure, this enemy was, one of a few encounters that you could have, but it never really changed much depending on which one you got, unless you were super lucky, and you ended up getting a rainbow room. They weren't limited to only being spawns in that room for all of those enemies, though. Sure, you wouldn't catch a roaming Varder enemy by any stretch of the means, unless you're talking about a different one. I'm talking about that big one, the tank. But stuff like the Banzer or Bar Lodos roaming about from time to time, those were there, right? They showed up. Well, big whoop. Why is this even relevant? It's important because New Genesis changed the way they do things, focusing on more of an open world type vibe and encouraging exploring. So we no longer have rooms, therefore they had to take a different approach to keep the formula working. Veteran enemies and some target enemies are now acting as those active roaming encounters that we saw in base game, making it so we can fight a big scary enemy from time to time without having a dedicated encounter, such as like those final rooms. Urgent quests are now acting though as those boss room encounters, giving us the ability to go and challenge something big while we wait for that proper urgent quest, feel, like with Dark Falz. I'd like to close this off by saying we are still in the beginning of New Genesis, even though it's been out for a long time. And it's going to be a long time before we start feeling like this is a complete game that Global was introduced to with the introduction of PSO2 in its base format. Give it some time to flesh out a little, because if Sega keep making stuff like and I'm only going to say this once, Dark Falz Urgent Quest, things could get good. Now if you excuse me, I'm gonna go get ready to take down Dark Falz again. So thank you for hearing me out. I'm Kaido, and hopefully I see you around. Good luck out there.